Hello again.
Uh,
What's up? I think I'm gonna have you all start by introducing yourself and kind of giving a little bit of background of what you're about and what you do. Maybe just about what you do. Let's start. That's easy. Tell me what you're about right now.
Everything. Just to capitalism, free Palestine, fight anti. You gotta like pepper that in there, especially right now.
Yeah, I agree.
But I guess, so my name is Gwendalynn Roebke. I'm a fifth-year student at CU Boulder who studies a mix of astrophysics, neuroscience, and philosophy with an emphasis on philosophy. And I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I'm super bad about saying pronouns because I'm just like, I look like a they, them. And then I'm like, no, the rest of the world does not process that. And so I'm a they, them, theirs. Ooh. And a lot of my work, specifically with Kamala, is centered around creating BIPOC spaces in very like white space like areas, specifically Boulder, but we're trying to just bring in as many folks as we can. And on campus I coordinate like the Radical BIPOC Femme Collective, and I coordinate building leadership among communities of color called Black.
Awesome.
I know.
Okay, so my name is Kamala Gopalakrishnan. I am originally from West Virginia. I moved here in 2017 officially, and I live in Fort Collins. My pronouns are she or they. You can use them interchangeably or concurrently, or no pronouns at all. Also wanted to say that. You can also just not refer to me at all. Just don't perceive me at all. Like, just don't ever refer to me ever again. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I graduated from WVU and University of Pittsburgh, where I did my MFA in poetry. So that is my area of passion. And I'm just interested in writing in general, but also zine making is a huge part of my life.
Yes.
I was introduced to zine making in Pittsburgh, and I learned about the history of it, which I'm sure is very whitewashed, right? It's like they're saying came from, the punk movement in the 70s. Well, guess what? We need to talk about Black punk femmes who actually started the shit. So trying to, give them the credit, right? So zine making is a huge part of my life. Poetry, plants. I love my indoor plants. I'm a huge plant fan. I have a neighbor cat, Michael, who's basically my boyfriend now. So
What does Michael look like though?
He's like a brown and black striped tabby. He's super cute. He's like only 3 or 4 years old. Big guy though.
Sounds like he's your cat now.
Yeah, he's adopted me at this point. But yeah, so that's basically what I'm about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for that reminder too. I almost never say my pronouns out loud, and they are they, them, theirs, for a lot of reasons. And I talk about that in other places. But I want to talk with you all about the stuff you're doing. I'm really super excited about it. I've been watching on social media for a while and finally got to go to one of the readings, which I was very thankful to be part of. And that was something I noticed. It was definitely in a predominantly white space. And there are some things that you do that are very interesting to me. I mean, obviously there's like, so I don't know, I kind of feel like a good segue is that mug, Gwendalynn.
Oh, you're talking about my mug again.
Yeah.
Shout out to Hari Kondabalu.
Right? If you're watching, Hari.
Bro, I'm terrible though. I'm super terrible because like he has this whole segment about like breaking up with a white woman and now he has a white girlfriend. Which I mean, I like it's not bad, but it's just like I don't know. I'm a weenie, so I'm just like scandalized. But well, I mean, it's just interesting too because I think when we speak about like Black and brown love and stuff like, well, because like it just becomes complicated. It's like, do you wait for like a Black and brown person? Yes is my answer, but also like there's like this damage that we do to each other, I think, a lot of the time as Black and brown people, like unintentionally, because we're all like trying to navigate like these white spaces. And so like we are harmed by these white spaces. And I would argue disproportionately Black and brown femmes are harmed by these spaces. And then we still have harm inflicted upon us by like masked Black and brown people. And I'm just like, what is this absurdity? But yeah, this is my mug, Demon Tears.
I love this mug.
White tears.
Hashtag white tears. For more information. See, and this conversation is really interesting to me too. I've grown up, I've spent most of my life in predominantly white spaces, and am just getting the language to be able to talk about my experiences, because there are a lot of things I feel that I wasn't able to pinpoint being in these spaces and growing up with the white side of my family in Boise, Idaho, and then moving to Denver, you know, spending some time in Portland, all these places that, you know, have a lot of coolness about them, but also if there's anything that speaks to where the Black side of my family comes from or the Indigenous side of my family comes from, it's hidden somehow, or, you know, it's a little out of the way. And then also, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to stop there for a second.
No, I feel you. Yeah, it's like one of those things where you know, growing up in West Virginia, I was often one of the only people of color. There were almost no Black people in the schools that I was growing up in. And so I noticed the narrative around Black and brown people, but especially Black people, was very, very fraught. And so I saw my parents just blindly kind of accepting that narrative. And at some point, I think when I left West Virginia and I moved to Pittsburgh, which is like a bigger city, you know what I mean, and a much more diverse population, I was able to really, really radicalize myself at that point.
Yeah.
And just basically just learn about history all over again, because
and it's
yeah.
I know for me, when that started happening, I'm like, what?
Yeah, like crisis of faith, right? You know?
And still, like every day, it's like, what? Wait, what?
The other day, I learned about the racist history of clowns, and I had no.
The minstrel act?
Can I curse? I'm sorry.
Yeah, do it. No, that's not why. I'm like, whoa.
No, it's all good. I had no fucking idea. Like, apparently back when slavery was abolished, and there was a, you know, new population of freed Black people who magically weren't able to get jobs or any land or anything like that, because like, interesting how racism didn't cure itself after that. But there were these minstrel shows that started to happen around the turn of the 18th, 19th century. And they depicted clowns with downturned faces, which were basically making fun of houseless Black folks.
Oh, wow.
I mean, the big giveaway is that they wear Afro wigs too.
Yes,
like, don't remember. And I think that's like speaks to how I have like a different experience kind of than both of you.
Yeah.
And that I was raised in Colorado Springs, which people make fun of for being super conservative, super white. But the weird kicker about Colorado Springs is that it's actually not as white as a lot of places in Colorado, like Fort Collins.
Fort Collins is so lily white.
And so like I was also raised where like there were fewer Black and brown people, but we were still around. And it just so happened that a lot of us were in the military because, you know, predatorily like getting Black and brown folks to go fight and die for a country that will fight and die for them. But I was raised with both of my parents. And so I was raised with my like Black mother and my white father, and I had 3 siblings. And so there were always people who like looked like me because they were related to me. And then even my cousin, just because my mother's family are also so like similar, I suppose, to your background, Tameka. They are freedmen, they are Black Native American people. I was used to Black people looking like me or looking like some variation of me. I was very used to having a family that looked like across the board. And so I was like raised in a way by like both my parents, because it was also that my mother was like the darkest sibling and most of her family was lighter. And so we like saw in real time how colorism played out. We were educated very quickly, and how we wouldn't live the same life as my mother, and how we wouldn't live the same life as like white people. So I don't know, I feel like I had an opposite experience, because like very early on I was just mad all the time. I was like, why is everyone racist? Like I remember there was one third grade teacher who she like wouldn't call on me. And she would like to put me into GT or my older sister, and my like the only time my parents have ever showed up on time for anything, I swear, in my life, was to like pick me up this one year, because they would like, my dad would like show up just to like watch her in class and to see if she was calling on Black and brown students.
Yeah.
And I never knew that till later. And I would always say, oh my God, my dad is here. And he's like, Gwendalynn, don't wave at me, I'm doing my research. But that's so like, I've just been mad for a very long time. I've been an old man, like old Black man, for a very long time.
I love it though. I love it though, because me, it was like always like, what is wrong with me? Like it can't just be me, right? It can't just be, it can't be everyone else, is what I kept saying. Like it appears in my journals a lot, and now I'm just like, actually, and it's taking me this long, you know, like certain readings and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I feel like there's also this bitterness on my part, because so like even when they teach Black history or like Black and brown history here, something that was very salient to me, because it's always like they'll ask like the Black kid about slavery, whatever. But
oh my God,
yeah. A multiracial person, and they teach you about loving versus like you remember that you weren't even technically legal, that you weren't even a thing that existed, and then you look up like the Black history of the world, and you look up South Africa, and it's like, oh shit, like even in the 90s, and then again like with Trevor Noah, and he comes through and he's like, I was a crime. And I think there's this added layer to Blackness in that respect, not to like not to bring up like the tragic mulatto story again, because it's not that, but it is this very real I don't know, this very real feeling where it's not just being like, oh, I'm neither and I'm one, but it's like sincerely being in a country where you're like, no, I didn't exist. And when I did exist, you didn't recognize me for the intricacies I lived with.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So much.
Yeah, so much.
May I interject?
Yes, absolutely.
What you know, just all of this in terms, I think it's so interesting that we have such unique experiences around, you know, our radicalization, and yet here we are, we arrived, you know, or we're arriving, constantly arriving. And we were able to all meet at this reading, and I think that's magical. Like, you know, we're all from literally like opposite ends of the United States, and then we just you know, coalesced into this community, and like that's really what I was trying to look for when I moved out here. And for 3 years it wasn't happening, especially not in Fort Collins. But the main point I wanted to make was when you said like, is there something wrong with me, right? Thinking of that feeling, I think constantly of the ways in which colonization has made us feel gaslighted as a people, right? Black and brown people have been systematically gaslighted into thinking that we're the problem and we're the aggressors. Right. And it, you know, it's definitely, I feel a lot of anger when I think about that, like how long it's all deliberate. The history books, everything, you know, media, it's all making us, gosh, I can't even form words right now. I'm just like, so much thought, but like just bringing us to that point of, either we can ignore the situation, but it makes it really difficult for us to break through that that barrier intentionally. So and that's what they do.
And that's one of the things I noticed, like at this reading, is so I like to make a joke about us 90s kids about how, like, what the fuck were we doing? We were listening to sad music and feeling sorry for ourselves, especially for people who like kind of like shit talk millennials and etc. right on up. I'm just like, dude, you know, that's not right. Because I remember when they were talking about Gen X and how shitty that felt. And you know, some parts of that is true. And maybe I was just hanging out with those particular people, but there are different things I'm seeing, and there are different things that I saw at this reading. And part of it is, y'all aren't dogged by these stories. Like, you're not, like, there's a certain amount of empowerment that's going on that's really amazing, and fire, obviously, which comes with you sometimes. And also, like, this language of inclusivity, like introducing this language of inclusivity, which I wanted to talk about, because I realized in that moment when it happened, I was like, that is something I don't have. That's something that I want, coming from where I come from, and often feel a lot of guilt around learning everything that I've learned, because, you know, I have both the oppressed and the oppressor inside of me, right? And so it's like, how do I how do I reconcile this? And I saw it happen on the stage. It's like, yes, this shit happened and it's not okay. And if you want to sit at the table, we're gonna talk about it. Like,
Yeah.
obviously everyone has to pull their equal weight, but I wanted to talk about that a little bit, if that.
So even with that language, so fun fact, I decided to like sell my soul to philosophy, because why not? But I wrote a paper, in my paper, like the most academic, I wrote a paper. It was for fun, and it was this paper that was like how seat at the table politics are anti-liberatory and play into capitalist and colonial ideologies. Because if I'm honest, I don't want a seat. It's not even me making my own table, it's me making a community who can eat together. And that's what most of my work has been lately, because it's like, I don't want to constantly have to become palatable. I don't want to constantly have to educate people in a way where it's them relying on me and thinking it is okay to basically use my emotional and intellectual labor without any idea of compensating me. And compensation, of course, isn't just like them monetarily paying me. Compensation is them holding dialogue with me and not having this kind of like accosting nature when they're asking for information,
right?
Especially because it's information that then, you know, takes them up from under themselves. Like you're saying, there are those of us who are the oppressors and the oppressed. And of course, the oppressed can be the oppressor, which I think we mentioned at the reading, is that especially with all of our different backgrounds, like I can't talk about my Blackness or my queerness without talking about what I look like and how I appear to others. And that's not me trying to like hate on myself. That's not me trying to like make this space uncomfortable and calling to attention how we look, but how we look matters. And even if we look at like Janet Mock and she talks about pretty privilege, it's huge. I'm not saying I'm pretty, but like but the ways in which I am received are both very validating and invalidating. When I did try to be like more butch and include my, like to make sure that the they them stuck, it just wasn't working for me. And it also felt not necessarily like an act of violence to myself, but it was that it was received by particularly male people in a way that I was like, I don't feel safe. And so I want to make sure that people who are in similar boats, of course, have that access. Will there be hard conversations? Yes, but it's making sure the space is primed for those hard conversations. And just how we set up the space too, we were like, we know that the people in the space want to have those conversations. It's because I have been accused of hating white people, which I'm just like, no. But it's this valid thing.
While drinking your mug.
Well, and then I was accused of also hating light-skinned people, and it's like, no, what you're saying is hate is me calling out the ways in which we are benefiting from all of these systems, even if we don't like to admit it. And I'm about to like shoot it over to Kamala though, because so like one of the reasons also why I feel like so comfortable speaking of my identity, why I'm like, I really don't give a shit, it's like, you want to fight, let's go fight, is because also in high school it wasn't just me like being like, oh, I'm like a multiracial Black person, but it's like I'm invested in Blackness, I'm invested in white, like I'm invested in understanding and deconstructing these things because they do happen globally. And so even like coming to college, I was coming from Germany, I had gotten a scholarship and I was there for a year, and I was there at the height of the refugee crisis, and I was seeing people who look like myself, and including myself, who were getting harassed, who it was just like, oh, why are you here? And even when I came into a German classroom, predominantly actually Black and brown people in my German school, because it wasn't the like good school, and I said I was Black, they're like, no, point to the one Black, or like the one visibly coded Black, and they're like, Freddie is Black. And so I had seen how Blackness had functioned different places, and I gotten very invested in what was happening, not just with people who were from African diaspora, but I got invested with like, okay, like let's talk about what's happening to like those in Myanmar with talk about how genocide is this thing that unites us as oppressed people, or at least it should, because what this is a genocide. And people don't like that framing because it sounds just, it's like so violent. But it's like, this is a violent undoing of Black and brown bodies, of marginalized bodies. And I guess, and that's why I'm like throwing it to Kamala, because it's also like around that time in high school, I had gotten like very interested, not only in like Harikon Bolu, but like in the Dalit like struggle or the untouchable struggle, and then just seeing all these like interweavings of Blackness and brownness, and how we have to adjust language for that. But Kamala, because you're in that community. It was also that I used to love Alokvayed Minon, and then now I'm just like, I can't deal with you. But I have some,
I don't know, like, it's being a light-skinned South Asian person, I definitely relate to the struggle, not struggle, it's more like the phenomenon of being simultaneously an oppressor and being oppressed. And like going to India was really a catalyst for that process for me, or realizing that for me, because it's so different being in the United States. I'm coded differently, right? I'm coded as just brown, a brown person. Right. And also my skin tone is taken into account as well. But in India, it's far more nuanced, I believe, because it's also my caste that's taken into account. And just for total transparency's sake, my caste, at least my family, identifies as Iyer Brahmin, which is supposedly the highest caste in the chain of caste privilege, which is something that I definitely have to confront every single day, especially when I'm in India, especially when I'm speaking with people who are darker skinned, those who identify with Dalit communities, and other like quote unquote lower caste communities that are being disenfranchised. And so this process has been very illuminating to me in realizing how complacent my family has been, how complacent I have been, sometimes even consciously. Seriously, you know, and now it's about giving up my power, giving up my position of privilege to make sure that that Dalit people have a secure future, right? And it's not just in India. Like, if you've heard about what's happening in Sri Lanka, Elam Tamils, who are also, Elam Tamils are probably one of the most oppressed groups in South Asia, just because of the fact that they've been systematically, killed, like the families, every single aspect of genocide has been carried out. And I have a friend named Sindhujan Varadaraja, and he lives in Germany, so it's like full circle.
There's a lot of Tamils in Germany.
Yes, and there's a reason for that, right? Because when they took refuge from Sri Lanka, a lot of them decided to go to Europe, specifically Germany, because of their refugee laws. And so it's interesting to see how this all kind of, history repeating itself, because now we're still seeing the effects of that. We're still seeing ongoing genocide in Sri Lanka and other parts of India as well, especially when it comes to Muslim people. That's another thing to also, keep in mind. It's like, I, as a person who was brought up as a Hindu, I have religious privilege as well there, right? Because India is a Hindutva, right-wing, fascist country that values Hinduism above all other religions. And that's another aspect, of course. But yeah, I don't know where I was really going with that, but I just felt like, yeah, that's been on my mind for so many weeks now. And, it's good that we're all kind of coming together to just talk about that.
Thank you for that. It's definitely an insight I haven't gotten because I've had a lot of interest in India, and the only folks I talked with were in Mumbai, and they were journalists and movie makers. One was a movie maker, the other two are journalists, and then there's one who's in tech. And so they're doing okay, and every once in a while they'll say something like, like, I leave my house and I feel guilt every day. And they're also very, I guess, complicit in a way, because they're building a very comfortable life. And that's how, you know, and that, you know, it's like hard to begrudge that. The part that I wanted to get at was the part where I obviously had romanticized a lot of what little knowledge of India I had. I haven't had a chance to go, but I remember when one of them said that was just like, yeah, like right in my street. Like if I look out of my window, I see it's right there, the inequity, and I feel guilty every day. And lucky for me that I can shut my window, you know what I mean? Like, and it was just that one thing that she said. And otherwise it's just like, just trying to live their lives, I guess. But I don't know. I don't really know. I don't know. But, and that makes me think here too, when you say that word complicit, like my wheels start turning about all the ways that I'm complicit and all the ways that my privilege shows up as well. And I mean, even in Denver, we have a lot of inequity, a lot of homelessness, a lot of people experiencing homelessness. And I ride the bus a lot, I walk. And just acknowledging people on the street, I think it's really important. I think sometimes it's you make decisions because of safety concerns, but like for the most part, the people that I'm passing around the bus with are also people, and they have it a lot worse than, or a lot more rough than I do, and so it's a practice every day, because like there is like that, you know, want to be good and also want to be safe, and also want to be able to have comfort, and also always thinking about, well, what can I give? Like to the point where like one time someone outed me by like asking for the exact amount of change that was in my wallet, exact amount of change. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't have it. And I walked and I went to the bus and I looked in my coin purse and I had that exact amount of change. And I was like, oh boy, that's a doozy.
Yeah, wow.
Hello, universe.
Oh my gosh.
Because he was really talking at me like, I know you have 73 cents or something crazy like that. And I'm like, what is just, I got,
It's
and
interesting you bring up like the feeling like we have to choose like sometimes between safety and what was the other thing? I'm sorry. Just
like safety and like, I guess like actually being able to step to a point, like, well, to be able to give, but also not in like an imposing way.
Right.
Yeah. Sense. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people do that too. But tell me what you were gonna say, because something had come to mind about that imposing part.
Oh, I was just resonating with that, just like feeling like complicity. A lot of what comes about when I think about complicity, what comes up for me is like, you know, me rationalizing,
right?
After the fact, like, oh, like maybe they're gonna be fine, or like, I'm sure someone's looking after them. And it's this cult of individualism, really, that's plaguing us. And I think, right, it's all about building communities that, just like Gwendalynn said, like just building communities in which everybody feels safe.
Right.
Point blank. And that's it. And so I think a lot of why we feel fear is actually just it's really not rooted in reality, right? It's rooted in in the whiteness delusion is what I like to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to resonate. I just want to say that resonated with me for sure.
I always think it's such an interesting topic about like homelessness here in Colorado, specifically again for me in Boulder, because I think it does at times become fear rooted, and like, because like there are some dudes who will like yell at me. So like that's the one thing, because like there are plenty of homeless people who I just talk to them, because it's like, you're not homeless because of like, you're homeless because the society has failed you.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me still to see how like machismo shows up, where there's like it's not even like he's a homeless dude, because it's like any dude who's catcalling is weird as fuck.
Right.
But then to like have someone like ask you for money and then like yell at you and call you like a bitch, I'm like, what are you doing, sir? There's like layers happening where you still think this is acceptable.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me in Boulder too, it's like this very weird culture around like having our houseless population, just because Boulder is like this super wealthy place. And I remember someone telling me that in the USG, like our student government branch, someone was like, well, can't we just bust them out? And I'm like, what? Like, you couldn't just, you know, have adequate mental health like coverage. And then, but it's also for us, it's really weird. Because, so I live in family and grad housing, and there's this fun thing where, what was it? So there was like this homeless guy who was yelling at one of, and we're also like a really Black and brown community. And there's this one homeless guy, because we live right by the river, and he was like yelling at residents, and he was like digging through our trash, and he like made trash like everywhere. And then residents were like we're not gonna do anything because we're Black and brown, so like we're not gonna call the cops on this guy, because like there's this added layer where it's like, well, we don't want to like call the cops on this guy, but also this guy is like yelling at us, like this Black and brown community, and we have like, no protection against like what's happening. And so I don't know, it's like, for me, it's like nuanced, because it's just like, what do we do at this point? That it's also like, because we're Black and brown, you feel comfortable like coming in here and like still yelling at us and again subjugate, even like, I don't know, like there's layers of just white entitlement where I'm just like, bro, like, you know, there's no one to stop you from yelling at us, and like just doing this. So I don't know, I always think about, so I think homelessness is one of the hardest things for me to think about in America, because there's still like this caste system and this hierarchy of homelessness, especially because like the folks that I think I see the most are white, but statistically I know the people who are homeless are largely like Black and brown and queer. And so I'm just like, what is going on with you that you still like feel the entitlement? Because like I've honestly never had like too bad of a, like I've never had like a run-in with a Black or brown homeless person where they like get really, you know, like some kind of weight with me. I've never had that. I've had them where they're like, oh, like whatever. But I like have still seen with like I don't know if I'm bringing up like race, but I'm just like, this is just like this weird thing. And even my freshman year, there's a white homeless guy, like when we had a BSA meeting, and he was yelling at these Black people, and he was all like, well, these Black people are the reason why. And I'm like, what is going on? You can be homeless and still like somehow it's Black and brown people's fault. Like, I don't know. I just, again, that's why when I always talk about race and like socialists try to just make it about class, I'm like, no, you don't get to do that. Like, this is an intertwined phenomena where there are plenty of like poor white people who are still treated way better than Black and brown people, which is not to eliminate like Black and brown people with wealth, but it's like there are plenty of like fine off like Black and brown people who get killed by cops still, who are assumed to be low class, whatever that means, by basis of skin color. So I don't know, there's like this like complicated thing happening in my head right now, because like, oh, we're talking about homeless people.
Well, when you're talking about that, I'm thinking in Venn diagrams. So there are like all these Venn diagrams of hierarchies that happen, I think, in the United States, and maybe it happens everywhere, but like, you know, we have poor folks. So we have people experiencing homelessness, we have working poor, and everything between that. And then we start getting into middle class, that weird gray gradient of middle class into working or into upper middle class, and then the rich. And like, and it's just like, it's this weird thing that happens, like, you know, and race is obviously involved with that. And you can't like outskirt like the whole like fucking redlining stuff. Because there was someone who said this so eloquently pretty recently. Just a man, someone, it became like viral, and he totally broke it down, and I wish I had the words and the name and everything. I'll try to find it, but he's talking about why it's race and why it's not class. And he just breaks it all down. He's talking to like city council or something, and he's talking about redlining, and he's talking about how people are shuffled around, and how in Black and brown communities the taxes are still going towards paying for things like police and things like that are coming in and taking more authority and more power and everything away from these communities. And so their money is going out and still harming them. And like, it was so spot on in ways I couldn't possibly have explained myself. And like I said, I'll try to find that, because I think it's really important to remember that it is race. It's not class as much as that's something that, you know.
And it's because we have it ingrained, because like even because now I'm even reflecting even more, because for one of my jobs in Boulder, I was with the environmental center, but we would do home visits, and they're supposed to be like solely about people's feelings about the environment, and then we would change light bulbs and like it had great results, because then we're like doing this to hundreds of units, but we would like change light bulbs, hold dialogue with these people, and we would also like change their faucet stuff just to like make the unit more green and just hear their thoughts. And I remember there was one particular building where it was majority people who were in like a program. So they had been previously houseless, and then they're like going to this unit to just, you know, like get back on their feet. And I remember to this day, because like there were like Black and brown people in there, and they were always like super nice to me, very kind to me. And it was also this was like the whole program was also Black and brown people. So like I was going into their unit. And I remember where it was largely, so the people who were nicest to me, who again, like most of them had been previously homeless, and so like Black and brown, and women who were immigrants. And I say it that way because it wasn't necessarily just like Black and brown women, but there were like women from Russia who were very nice to me. And it was always, again, it was like a lot of white men who would single me and my partners out and just start like talking at us and like yelling at us and being very suspicious of us. And I was like, what are you doing, bro? Like me, random brown person, has entered your life to talk to you and with you about the environment, and you're just like, this is why you're wrong. And I think we got yelled at once, and like, y'all, you dirty Democrats, like this random shit. And I'm just like, and I'm like, sir, what? And it's like this deep sense of entitlement because of whiteness, specifically white manhood. This one white man just started talking at me, and he was like, oh, you know, like where you're from, and blah, blah, like I've been to Africa, just this random stuff. And I'm like, I don't want, and he's like, you know, the Me Too movement has made it so women don't think they can smile at men, because I was just trying not to engage with him. And I was like, no, I just don't want to talk to you. And he just like got super mad at me and offended. And I was like, everything you're saying, I just don't want to engage with, because it's really fucking racist. And when and my boss
so violent,
so
violent, like the language,
it was wild. And my boss who was there, who again is, so this also like goes to your, like, I know you briefly mentioned, Tameka, like this happening across the world. My boss at the time, she's from Colombia, but I would say that she's a pretty light-skinned Colombiana who has dreads. And she, when I was doing that, she's like, I don't know why you're so rude to this man. And I was like, because this man is racist. And she's like, no. And now, like, I think we're I don't know, I'm still really annoyed, because now she's like on the Black train, and I'm like, okay, what? But then like when I went and talked to my friend, and she's Nigerian, when I talked to my friend about this dude, she's like, oh yeah, he stopped me in the parking lot, and he was asking me if I was like a teen mom.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And so I just was like, why didn't you tell anyone to back me up? And of course I'm not like mad at her. I'm just like, this is some fuck shit. He asked you way worse questions. But I think it just goes to show too, like this entitlement is so ingrained. Again, not only in this man who's doing this to me, but to my boss, who was just, and then later she was like, Gwen, I'm so sorry, I didn't recognize that was racist. And I was like, this is because you probably don't listen to Black people back home. And I ended up going to Colombia, and I was like, you definitely are listening to Black people because they done been telling you. And again, like Colombia too is this amazing anomaly in Latin America where people like forget how Black Colombia is. It is very Black, which, I mean, I don't know how people forget, but they do. And then they try to also forget, so like with Colombia, people usually talk about drugs, and then they also usually talk about the civil conflict inside of Colombia, forgetting that it's still happening. But what they don't talk about is how that civil conflict moved, I don't want to say 2 million Black people, but like a hefty chunk of Black people from their communities. And in Colombia, they also do this thing where they give Black people land. And that land becomes this hotbed of violence because the government comes in and has all sorts of like weird insurgencies, because they don't have any protections to keep from illegal mining and to keep from the production of coca leaves, which at times are the only form of stable income for Black communities. So I'm just like it just goes to show like how globally too people don't listen to their Black people or their indigenous people, even though right now there's like this whole like fetishization of indigeneity, which I don't know if we're even gonna get into that, because that's a whole ass mess.
Ah.
Did you guys hear about, obviously you guys know what's happening in Portland, like the fuck shit that is happening in Portland, right?
Yeah.
Like the actual Gestapo. Yeah.
Right.
But also the quote unquote hashtag mom movement, the mom protesters. What's so interesting to me about that is that now they're saying, oh, the moms are coming out. The moms are coming out. Well, guess whose moms have been there since the beginning?
Right.
Black mothers.
Have you seen that one white lady naked and everyone's like, oh my God, this is feminism?
I
think I saw on your Instagram where you're like, stop.
So transphobic. Oh my God. The yoni power. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Boy.
Because if
You
a black
know what a
person,
yoni actually is, bro.
if a black or brown woman had done that, black and brown femme, they would have killed her. They would be like, oh, she's mentally
on
ill.
the spot. On the spot.
I saw that and I was just ignoring it. I was like, I don't have time for this. I was like, this stress in my mind. I was like, and then I saw black and like brown people who were like, oh my God, like some black and brown people were like, yes. And I was like, no, like, if you did that, what would happen? Oh, I don't know. There's some things right now I'm just not engaging. And not in like a,
no,
like,
yeah, self-care. Like, that's self-care.
Self-care. Yeah, that's for real. I remember just even with George Floyd, I remember that day I had come home from work. Someone was on the phone. Something they said like tripped me up a little bit, and I was literally screaming, like my whole body into the ground and knees buckling and like screaming till I was almost hoarse. And wow. I just like, yeah, all of that was happening, and it had finally hit me, and it scared me because it was just like how do I take this chaotic energy and focus it? Because now I know, you know, there have been some times in my life where I felt that like real super chaotic, you don't know what the fuck you're gonna do kind of energy, and how do you focus it? Because like obviously that's there, and I think it's also needed. It's like that recognition and the cognitive dissonance. It's like beyond cognitive dissonance, because it's like it is like injury isn't even the right word, but it's a wound so deep, it's an injury so deep that it's like it affects us that much, and it can bring us to our knees. And like that day I remember I worked at a coffee shop, and it was like there was this weird thing happening in my head too, where, oh, people feel like it's okay if they can come and get their grown-up sippy cup, you know, and then I see people in their yards and on their patios just having a nice time, and I'm like, but this is happening, and like, what the fuck, like what, and feeling just so incredibly helpless, and like what do we do?
I am a chaos monster, but I still remember too. So again, like I grew up knowing the story of Emmett Till very well. Mm-hmm. And ironically enough, for my GT program in 6th grade, we did projects on rosewood. So
wow.
I don't even remember. I just remember that was a thing that we did a project on. But then it was like a white lady was, anyway, I don't think she got into the intricacies of the white womanhood that was at play there. I think she only kept on the race massacre side. But I don't, so like, and I say this to people for forever. I have been a 65-year-old man for all of my life. And not because, because like, I remember talking about the best way to toast bagels when I was supposed to be like, was my track coach. In 7th, I was like, you gotta do this. You gotta put the olive oil, for real.
Larry David, yo, like.
Well, I mean, there's like questions about why I was, I don't know. Apparently my sister thought we were Jewish for most of our childhood. We're not. I mean, shout out to all Jewish people who might watch this. I appreciate like a lot of, because I said to someone here, I was like, I don't really have a lot of white friends. And then it was like this group of mostly like, it was in my physics class, it was mostly like black and brown, like multiracial kids. And then the one like WASP, he was like, what are you talking about? Are you not friends with so-and-so? Points to this like guy next to us. And I'm like, I was like, Fluffy is Jewish. And which is not to discount whiteness and Jewishness and stuff. But I was like, Fluffy is people have experienced genocide and therefore can join the club. But I mean, and again, so like with chaos specifically though, in this feeling of constant chaos. And it, like even with like us operating in these, I think at the reading, I said like this liminal space, this transformative space. I think lately I've been joking to myself, I'm the coyote and it's keeper. I am both of these possibilities. And so I think like with chaos, it's like, what even is chaos? Like, what can we describe as chaotic? Because half of the time, like what's happening with Black and brown people, or with the George Floyd protests, or even the BLM protests of my middle school years, because like that's how long like this has been happening in my life. It was a part of my childhood to watch people consume Black death. And even then I was like, why are you wanting me to watch this? I mean, to me, I'm like, this isn't chaos. When we understand as much as we can what is happening to Black and brown bodies, none of it seems chaotic to me. I'm like, this is a very thought out thing, even in the chaos. And I don't know, like, I'm like, I'm not gonna be like, I'm pro chaos. That's like the people who are like pro depression. I don't know. There was like a weird period in the 2010s where everyone's like, I'm sad, and I'm like,
guilty.
And the 90s. Yep, in the 90s.
And I mean, well, there's also like people who were like sad, but I'm like, are you depressed? There's a very big difference between those two things right there. It's
like melancholic and yeah.
And there's like these people who are like fight you if you're like, oh, I'm like not feeling great, and someone's like, well, I feel, and I'm like, I don't need that. And so I think also that though is like, well, and I don't like, even when I used to have like trouble sleeping, I was not a great sleeper, and then I'd be like, oh, I got like 4 hours, and someone's like, I got 3, and I was like, what the fuck is this comp? We're both doing bad, bro. Like,
no,
intervention time. And I think it's also that is just like with chaos and all this stuff. I think people have hyped it up, especially in artistic spaces, because and then they try to produce chaos. Where I'm just like, I don't know why you feel the need to make this whatever the fuck you're trying to make it, which is just this violent undoing of yourself. And that means sometimes there needs to be this violent undoing to really pull apart the pieces of us that are hurting other people and hurting ourselves. But some people, I'm like, you are not even doing this as a way to remove what is injuring you. You are doing this in a way to hurt others in the hopes that you get some sort of like revelation, which is also like why I don't like, that's why I say I like poems. That's why I say I like art, because I've realized that people who will label me an artist, which I mean is also like my thing, is like it's just been a lot of scumbaggy kind of people, like, which is not to say like I do, no, for real, especially like violent kind of like dudes. It's and I think they
predatory dudes,
and they're just like, oh, like artists. I'm like, so that means that you get to like do really shitty things to me in the name of my art. I don't know. So I'm just trying to chill. I'm like, I'm not like, if you've noticed all these like random things in my room, I'm very like, I'm like pro chaos at the same time, understanding that chaos is not in of itself. Like it's not this like weird thing that the West has made it either. Chaos doesn't mean that you just get to go around yelling at people and harming others. I think chaos is supposed to be a transformative space. Look at my cat poster.
I love that. I know. I've been
mesmerized. I swear, like it's very captivating.
It's in German. It's called Katzenmanifest, and it just has all these little things that they do, like schlafen, essen, fressen. I've had that since I was in Germany. I bought that shit, and so I was like, why would you buy that? And I was like, because it's great. And I've brought it everywhere with me.
I love it. It's great.
My Malcolm X poster.
I want to. That's great too. Obviously, for obvious reasons, for so many reasons. What is the painting behind you on your left, I believe?
That's my Pablo Picasso painting.
That is Picasso.
Also a product of one of my my university refund things. I was like, let me get this $10 large print of man with guitar. Very melancholy. I have like skulls and shit. Actually, let's do like a quick poster of Gwendalyn's room. Oh, there's like random stuff because I used to do collages, so I'm getting back into it. This one is from a queer Mexicano artist, Fabian. He got in like a lot of trouble for like Zapatista, drawn as like a very flamboyant gay ass man on a horse with wheels. Love it.
Awesome.
This is another one from a Mexican artist, and it's like this story of like, again, like chaos and I don't know, but I have more posters, but I feel like I can't zoom it that way because like my computer's not fixed.
So one of the things I want to talk about, and which I got excited about, so like I think I do like chaos. I'm not a very focused person anyway. It's just like I get around to doing all the things and they get done at some point. And also one of the things I say the most is the only thing we can count on is change. And I also, it's not necessarily hate. I like pretend the bad part, but like tricksters. I think tricksters are really interesting characters, and like just about every culture, right? Every culture. One of my favorite from India is Dattatreya.
Yeah.
And I love, like, you know, the fox energy, and Aztec and Mayan have some really interesting, like, super destructive tricksters.
Do you mean the man who flayed his skin? It's not reaching like a boat. Let me know.
I don't know. There's one that's like a jackal or something, and I just like, I think about that one a lot for some reason, and I can't remember if it's from Aztec or Mayan, but like it inspired a line for me. Is like, I really appreciate a good reckless trickster, so that we can recognize where our boundaries need to be, so that we don't end up with our entrails in their mouths, that kind of thing. Because you know, if they think it's funny, or if it's like, or if it's like, you know, some kind of catalyst for change, then that thing is going to happen. And if you let it in and you're not careful, you might end up in that state, right? And so I think, oh, go ahead.
I like tricksters though, because if you look at tricksters, they're the ones who, because they're the ones who start stories, or they bring the stories along. And not only that, but they're often the ones who subvert gender.
Loki, like all of it, yes. Like we could talk about Loki, and like, oh gosh, all of a sudden my brain went 15 directions all at once. Yeah, talk about that. So like, that's really exciting to me.
Well, I might not even tricksters though, but I feel like, let's just like go to gender and like mythology and like people, because like, and again, I'm gonna throw this to Kamala, but like, because like when I think about Hinduism and Indian deities, I don't think of women as passive. Like, I don't think, no, like, what, isn't it Shiva?
Decidedly. Shiva is supposedly a male deity, but
no, not Shiva. What is it?
Krishna,
not Krishna, because Krishna's a man too.
Kali Ma.
Yeah, so if you think about Kali, I'm like, this is the epitome of what a woman is not in the West. This is a woman who like not
every
steps
single thing about her.
No, like, I just want to even because like when I think of Kali, I'm just like how is this not? And again, like gender and all of these things, like even with the Orishas, when you think about Oija, and even Oshun, who's supposed to be like you think about, I don't know, I think about gender differently because there's like not even this allowance of a woman who is weak. But I don't know, I think I actually have like a thing of Kali like up on one of the walls, and there's a quote over it that says, "Time is the substance I am made of. It is the fire that consumes me, and I am that fire." And it's a line from Jorge's Lee's Burgess.
I need to send you this poem I wrote literally about Kali, and it has a line very similar to what you recited. But yeah, that's beside the point.
Do you have it handy?
Yes, let me.
I'm gonna pause really quick.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really interested. So I've been thinking about Kali a whole lot for a long time. All different manifestations of Kali as well, because like I don't know, I've been real subdued most of my life, but I'm always attracted to like these more fierce goddesses, and I love Kali because it's kind of like, my favorite story about Kali is the one with the demons, where the demons are like acting up, and like everyone's like, oh shit, we're gonna have to ask Kali because we can't solve this problem, and she comes out, she's all like terrible, and she's like just chopping off all the heads and like over,
wears them around her fucking waist like a boss.
Yes. Just starting over.
I mean, again, like if we bring in Oya, who I just I love so I write of like Oya and Oshun like very together, and so you weren't at the first open mic, but I did like a freestyle poem kind of about that, where it's like, I've stolen my sister's skin so you would listen to me, because in Oya's mythology, she is so ugly that people cannot look at her.
I didn't know that.
I know, I didn't know that. I had to like look at, I was like, what do you mean? And it's
that's why she wears a mask in a lot of pictures?
I think so.
Okay.
And it's also like, and when you think of Oshun, it is like, if we like have the way honey has been spoken about in Black community. Honey is a lighter person. Honey is a desirable person, someone to be looked at. And so even though when we look at who these people have as partners, so if we're talking about Oija, who has a similar role to Kali in terms of how she is in touch with death, she's married to war.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she's the bringer of storms. And I don't know, I just like thinking about that. Like the ways in which these like darker women, like these, I don't know, I just love it.
They
I'm
bring
like,
these really important facets that we don't like to talk about. I remember talking with, you know, a man who's in service of the goddess, and I was just like, yeah, I like the fiercer goddesses, and he gets real nervous, and he's like, yeah, I like the gentler goddesses, and I'm like, come
Of
on,
course he does.
like you like what you know about the gentle parts of the gentle goddesses, because I'm sure Easter kicks some ass sometimes too, you know, like.
Well, it's about like, yeah, it's this like connotation with, you know, darkness is like with rage, but righteous rage.
Yes.
Right? So like when I think of Kali, why she's so transformative to me in my radicalization is like, I worshipped her. I actually worshipped her. I have like, you know, slokas, like actual like verses where I would recite to her in cases where I felt unsafe around men. Seriously, that was like specifically for that reason, like violence against women and femmes. And also Durga is also another goddess that I look to as well, because she also embodies righteous rage in a way that has transformed me. And like also like realizing that historically dark-skinned femmes have been pinned as aggressive people, as you know, instigators of violence, when that literally the opposite is the case, right? I mean, they're the binders of our community, and they're the pillars of our community. And so yeah, just like repackaging. It's so interesting that you mentioned that story, because about the man and like the goddesses, because it's just like it really lays bare all of the things that we deify as a society in femininity, right? What is it about femininity that we deify? And conveniently ignoring the facets of femininity that go very much against that grain.
People are talking crazy because you know Mary got mad. You know Mary got mad.
Well, even before Mary, in the Torah, because I always mix it up with the Old Testament. There was Lilith. And Lilith wasn't having that shit.
Yes!
Demon queen, it's like, I was made the same time as you. Why would I be subservient to you? And so I think about that too. Or even, and I think it's so confusing to me, because even in the, I'm like, I honestly wonder where this weakness in femininity comes from. Because I know there's some biblical stuff about it, but even Judith, who is my phone background, and one of the most popular figures in classic painting in Europe, she beheads the man who is at the front of the army who's going against like the Christians. She goes in at night naked and beheads this man. And so I'm just like, and I mean, even some of their faves, like what's her name? Who was burned at the stake, this white woman in France. Huh? Yes.
No.
Wait, who?
Joan of Arc?
Yes, Joan of Arc. I'm like, this is also someone who was not only like a woman, but like super young. So I'm like, white people, where did you lose this shit? Like at what point were you just like, no, not anymore? Like even in your own history, like especially like not even Wicca, because fuck Wicca, Wicca's a mess. But in like actual, Wicca's a hot ass nasty mess. I'm sorry. My mom has like a beef with a woman who like at her job is a mess. But because like if you were sincerely interested in the shit that a lot of people were doing in Europe, like white folks, it was not Wicca. It was the reason it was a witch is because it's a dangerous person with knowledge. And then because there was higher concentrations of that in other cultures, you know, predominantly black and brown, where women were, or like not even just women, but people who were genderqueer, people who were not just men, practice these sorts of things, and those populations were seen as lesser. And I'm just like, y'all are so trifling and you like a little bit, and I'm gonna just ignore you because you're not even practicing your own shit correctly. Well, your own shit, whatever that entails.
Well, I'm trying to hold on to this one thing, and this is interesting to me too, because I like always, I like kind of quote unquote following the energy. And there are some practices that are obviously more full of power still than others. And it's interesting that you brought up Wicca, because I've come across it again and again. And it's just interesting. Like, I've always kind of walked away from it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's sweet. And then I walk away because there's always something about it that doesn't quite seem as powerful as, say, a shloka. I've done some Vedic meditation, and some of those mantras and those processes are intense, like really intense and life-changing. And I won't go too much into that, but like the energy there for me personally has always been different than, say, like saying something really sweet to the moon, which I love too. And I love ritual and ceremony, and it's just something, there's something about it often that seems a little canned, if that makes sense. And the energy isn't as true, and possibly because of that whole like watering down of lineage. I think that is okay. That is definitely something. But I guess we don't have a lot more time. But
no, I'm sorry. I was like,
no,
I didn't know
okay.
how this like the time was.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's not, some people talk for 2 hours, some people talk for 30 minutes. So it just depends. But the thing that I want to get to before, hold that thought, is this term that keeps coming up, radicalization. And radicalization, you're talking about it as an action, and tell me about that.
Me?
Anybody? I want to know more about this, because I love this. And like I said before, like there's this energy of like empowerment in the work that you're doing, and very solidly feet on the ground about it. And then also that language of inclusivity, using it as a tool. But like the radicalization part, like this part, I feel that very young folks have these tools and words and energy for that. I don't know if most of us have had, and I am interested in that.
I think.
Go ahead.
I was gonna, well, because I actually don't like when people say that sometimes, where they're like, oh, I don't think we have it and the young folks do. I think
I was prepared for that.
Well, I don't like that, because I think sometimes it allows for this, for people to be like, oh, like, because I'm older. But I think it's also just language has changed. I think that's really what it is. But people have, like, when you ask someone how they feel, like that feeling hasn't changed for the most part.
Right.
I think that's what is important about being inclusive and radicalizing people, is that it is like radicalizing, but it's also just giving people these newer terms that are that make it easier to name, like as people say, like to name a wound, to name what's wrong.
Yes.
But I think that's really what it is. It's like saying, you remember that feeling? Like, do you remember when so-and-so said something to you? And there are some people who like are more in respectability politics, who are older and Black and brown. But you prompt them, you're like, but you remember that when someone said that to you or did that to you, how that felt. And I think that's the most effective tool, because then even some of the people who try to deny it in the moment, they're like, oh, like, I don't know about that. I think a lot of them circle back because they know, because it generates this inner conflict. You're like, well, no, I know how that felt. And even though I'm trying to tell this younger person that they should learn how to cope with it, or they should learn how, like, I know that how that felt, and why would I want to have them have that same experience? So I think that's how I process it. And so it's inclusion in like a real way, where it's not just like you get to sit in the chair, but it's like, I'll ask older people, I'm like, I don't even like saying older people, because there's also younger people. I'm like, what are you doing? Because they were raised by the older people. Like, why are they?
Well, right, we're all informed by, exactly.
But what were you gonna say, Kamala?
Oh, just like thinking along the veins of like radicalization and like a shifting of power, right? Like as a means of shifting power back to Black and brown people, back to colonized peoples, because our power has been taken away for so many hundreds of years, right? And so this reading, I know, like, I have to say, like, I'm sorry if I'm gushing right now, but I'm so grateful we met Gwendalynn. And because like I was just like, fuck Colorado at that point. Like I was about to be like, I'm just gonna get in my car and fucking drive until I can't drive anymore and then just start over.
Woo.
And then I just went to this reading. No, like I was frustrated as fuck. You know what I mean? Like the lack of community, and like to know that I have the honor and the privilege to like be a part of this is honestly more than fulfilling, right? And it's like, it's that process, because it is so related to that process. It's so inextricably tied to that process of reclaiming our power. The fact that we took up fucking space in the middle of a largely white area is fucking radical. That's power shifting, because otherwise that would have just been taken up. And if you notice during the reading, there were quite a few white folks that were very much too comfortably walking right in front of us in the middle of the performances with zero regard, right? And so I see this like push and pull dynamic, and it's like you see it in action. And that's even in the first reading, the Juneteenth reading, people weren't wearing masks. Some people weren't wearing masks. So it's so evident, and like that's why these readings are so important and they're so necessary, and like we need to literally take up fucking space.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like that's part of it. That's part of it.
And my intention also though is not only like us taking up space, but because I don't do like safe spaces per se, because like that's just not a thing I do. What I do though, what I do is that when I was like putting this together and thinking about it, it's like, because again, like with poets in Boulder and even other black and brown poets, I was like, why do I always feel like I'm competing with you to count how many scabs I have? I don't have time for that. Why does it feel like I'm always only doing poetry for either like performing for white people or performing some form of POC identity for you, another POC? I do not understand that. I don't want to do, and for a while I didn't. I was like, I'm not going to do poetry if that's what it is to you. And so that was also like the reason. It's like I want to have a space where it's not like, oh yes, like I am the most like lyrical whatever, or like, oh, like it's like I want to pick people who might not have gotten a chance before to perform their poems. Because I think like when I was invited to do poems, it's because it's like, oh well, this can still fit into some sort of category. Like when I do a poem, it's so that people can like engage with that in a different way. And it was like I'd only do certain poems. I'm like, no, this is not fair. Like if you hadn't seen my other work, you wouldn't have asked me. And there are plenty of black and brown people who they don't want to show you their work because it's just you consuming their grief.
That's
and
real.
Their life and their joy. But it's also that they don't want to show their work because this isn't a space that's constructive even with other black and brown people. It's going to be you doing this weird sort of like kind of like gatekeeping of who is a black and brown poet, and I just don't want that. And so the space is also supposed to be like, we're all here, we're all BIPOC.
Yes.
So 2 things. I really want to hear this poem. And
I have it up for you.
And cool. So we'll do that first. And
okay, cool. I'm just, my heart is so full right now. Okay, so this poem I actually did perform on the Juneteenth reading. It's called Unfair and Lovely. It's based on the Fair and Lovely, bleaching creams that are so popular in India and South Asia. And I invoke Kali, right? Because as a dark-skinned goddess, right? And just the righteous rage along with that. So
yes, awesome.
Unfair and lovely. Kali, I could almost feel your red fury tongue rushing out from my mouth when mother's neighbor Archana scans my tan lines, says, "You've lost your color. You want to borrow some cream?" And instead, I want to find your startled eyes. Allow me to whisper to myself later when the mosquitoes won't stop drawing samples from my thighs. The paper strewn amongst the dust will build on the walls, conquer flickering tube lights. How it clicks like wall lizards, proving my mother right when she shakes her head, throws away the classified ads, pleading in each section, fair women only. In the same month, I will summon your flesh to fester on crowded store shelves, those bleached tubes with their alien petal names. Oh, uncanny valley. Oh, dark-skinned goddess. Maybe the hands you wear across your waist belong to the men who shook their heads at our neem bark skin.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just got chills.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it came out of like a literal trance. So
Holy moly.
yeah. Thank you for allowing me to share this. I feel witnessed.
Thank you so much for sharing it. What else? Is there anything else?
Oh my gosh. Well, there's another, this is pretty fitting. But either of you are familiar with the Yugas, right? There's like 4 Yugas in Hinduism, and we are currently in Kali Yuga, the decadent generation. We just have to pull it up real quick.
Oh. In the meantime, I know our time is getting really
short. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just I'm trying to do the thing. How can we support what you're doing? I know there's a zine coming out.
Submit to the zine.
Yeah.
Get other BIPOC to submit to the zine.
How do folks do that?
There is a nice link that Kamala has made on our Instagram page, and it's like a form, and you like fill it out.
I'll have that in the bottom of the of this video then. That's good.
I feel like that's the big thing, and like share it with other BIPOC folk, especially. So again, I've been also trying to, because my big thing and the thing I really want to do is also like get BIPOC folk who maybe previously haven't performed to perform. So especially at Juneteenth, I had invited people who hadn't performed in a while. I'd invited a friend who I don't think had ever performed her poetry, but I knew that she wrote a lot of poetry. Just because again, I think that like having that space that's dedicated to you, like that 15 minutes that is your time,
right?
I think it really influences how then people can go forth and later perform and create poetry. I don't think I ever really truly enjoyed performing poetry until I, if I'm honest, until I did get like a feature, because then I was like, this is my time.
Yeah.
And like, if you don't like what I'm saying, well, too bad, because this is literally my time.
Yeah, too bad, exactly. So I have the Kali Yuga poem up for you guys.
Okay.
I can go ahead and start. So it's in 4 parts. Kali Yuga. 1. Mother counts to an odd number in the new kitchen before circling cubes of lit camphor at the fading soot paste on my jaw. She says my eyes remind her of masks hanging from lorries. I only remember their red chili tongues. 2. This is the age of burnt brass, of oiled rags, of rock salt. One evening, my throat measured 104 degrees. I'm told that I was the recipient of an evil eye in the form of demon mosquitoes. That night, I dream of an opened eye, a final flood. 3. No word for 2 weeks after the wave. In an email, my mother writes about water at her cottage doorstep, a missed morning walk, earthen tiles from the hotel lobby broken into thirds. 4. In 6,000 years, there will be no more red left, no ceilings or cockroaches or ash, no more bruised thumbs, no garlands, only worlds of mud. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. This really means a lot to me that you both said yes to this talk. And I'm really excited about the work you're doing. And how can, just like any way people can support the zine or the readings or even your personal work in poetry and otherwise, poetry, art and otherwise, however you'd like to frame that. And just like, yeah, I'm just really thankful that you're here. And it gave me a huge spark of hope seeing it. And just knowing that like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's not for naught. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just
likewise.
not to lay it on y'all, because obviously I have my work to do, and all of us have our work to do, but it is helpful, and if there's anything I could do, I would like to. So just let me know. And
honestly, just thank you for existing, first of all.
Thank you.
Your very existence is a gift in this universe, so just want to thank you, and also thank you for arranging this. Thank you for performing at the last open mic. It was absolutely glorious. It was transformative.
Yeah.
In terms of supporting us, I would say, for those watching, right, if you're on Instagram, follow us on BIPOC Boulder Creatives, all one word. That's our handle on Instagram. We're also on Facebook as well. I'm sure you could just type in, BIPOC open mic, and I'm sure we'll pop up, right? Or something like that, I'm sure. But also, I'd like to share my Cash App in case anyone is watching and is white and has financial privilege and wants to support my work personally. My Cash App is NAAN Sequitur, and that's a cash sign in front of it. So, but on the same lines of that, we're also going to set up an artist fund pretty soon. I think possibly concurrently in line with the zine release, if I'm not mistaken. And so we're really trying to make sure we're setting up a fund so that each performer, each contributor to the zine is fairly compensated, because that's another part of inclusivity, right? Like we have to get paid for our work, and that's one of the reasons I'm so grateful to be part of this. It's just radical on so many levels. So yeah, I think those are the few things that I think of. And of course, submit to our zine. The link is in the bio. The Google form is in the Instagram bio. So yeah, just drop us a line, attach whatever you want to attach, and we'll do it. Let's do this thing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's yeah. Oh, I mean, I think Kamala covered it. If people want to pay me, you literally just type in my name in Venmo, boom, you can pay me that way. But yeah, I think Kamala really covered it. And also, like, if you have a BIPOC friend who writes poetry, who maybe has never performed it, we would love to open this space to them and like feature them so that they can, develop as artists and develop as poets.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and close this up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.